Hey guys, tonight we're settling into the dreamlike world of a Roman emperor who ruled an empire, yet somehow still made time for long naps, leisurely strolls, and silent corridors lined with cushions. Picture this: warm marble floors, cicadas humming in the olive groves, and Emperor Hadrian, not sharpening swords or shouting orders, but reclining in the shade of a fig tree, eyes closed, draped in soft linen. You're there, sandals dusted from the walk through the palace garden, and a slave carefully places a woven mat at your feet. You're not preparing for a battle.
Jure preparing o for anab.
Because that's what the emperor's doing.
Again. This is entese Rom of war entblot, no gladiators to nicht.
This is the other Rome. The one where power lounges, where politics happen with a barest whisper, and where one man's desire for peace and a little shut-eye somehow calms an empire stretching from Britain to Syria. You probably wouldn't survive this: too much lavender oil, not enough urgency. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've just arrived at Hadrian's countryside estate, somewhere near Tiber, modern-day Tivoli. The sun has done its slow climb and now slants across a horizon lined with umbrella pines. The gravel crunches under your sandals as you walk toward the villa, but there's no one rushing to greet you.
No herald, no trumpets.
Just a quiet eunuch motioning silently toward the garden terrace.
You follow. And there he is. Hadrian.
Curled like a cat on a stone bench wrapped in fine wool. One hand dangles limply. A scroll lies unread beside him. He's napping. This is not a rare sight. You'll learn quickly that this emperor, a lover of art, architecture, and oddly moderation, has woven the nap into the imperial lifestyle.
Not a quicks notze, mind you.
We're talking hours, sometimes scheduled with the precision of a military maneuver. Historians still argue whether these naps were born from genuine exhaustion, political calculation, or just an overindulgence in wine and heavy fish sauce. What's certain is that Hadrian knew how to pause. He ruled, yes, but only after a nice lie down. You shift uncomfortably, unsure whether to cough gently or sit quietly until he wakes. The air is thick with jasmine.
Some wäre, water murmurs from a hidden fountain.
You think maybe you'll sit.
The bench is warm. The air is still.
It wouldn't be the worst thing if you dozed off too.
Now, about Hadrian.
He wasn't your average Roman emperor, foaming at the mouth about conquest. After years of bloody expansion under emperors like Trajan, his predecessor and adoptive father, Hadrian turned Rome inward. He pulled troops back, fortified borders, and chose consolidation over conquest. Which means fewer swords, more scrolls, and lots of time to nap. Some believe his famed wall in Britain, a sleepy thing by military standards, wasn't just about defense. It was also about drawing boundaries. A literal sigh. That's enough empire for now, the wall seems to say. Let's take a break. This might explain why Hadrian was known to vanish into his gardens for whole afternoons. The courtiers whispered, of course. Is he sick? Is he lazy? But nothing ever crumbled. The provinces were quiet. The taxes rolled in. People grumbled, but people always grumble. Besides, when Hadrian did speak, it was calm, clever, and often laced with dry humor. You once overheard him say to a senator, "The empire won't collapse while I'm horizontal."
It didn't.
Here's a fun fact: Hadrian traveled more than any emperor before him, over 21 years on the road. But even abroad, he brought his love of stillness. His retinue knew to plan around nap hours. Picture it: troops lined up, horns ready, only to be told, "Not yet, the emperor's sleeping." One general joked that Hadrian's army marched on silence and siestas. And yet, his napping wasn't mere idleness. There's evidence he used these moments to escape the noise of the court, the constant barrage of decisions, the suck of power. Roman politics was loud, theatrical. Hadrian, by contrast, drifted in and out of it like a man watching a play from behind a curtain. In one letter, a young philosopher named Aelianus describes visiting Hadrian's villa and being told to wait until the emperor completes his thoughts and rest. It said Hadrian sometimes emerged from his naps with whole legal edicts composed in his mind. Whether or not that's true, the myth stuck.
The sleeping emperor es sage. Dreamer es ruler.
But there were critics. Tacitus, though writing before Hadrian's time, famously detested emperors who pursued softness as philosophy. And later commentators would wonder whether Hadrian's love of peace came at the cost of Rome's glory. Was this the beginning of decline, they asked, masked in lavender and linen? Still, let's be honest, if given the chance, Wouldn't you choose a life of gardens, quiet fountains, and mid-morning naps over endless wars? Hadrian did. And Rome, for a time, did not fall. You stretch out on the stone floor beside the bench, just far enough not to wake him.
The sun warms your back. You close your eyes. You can hear the birds. You can hear your own breath.
You can hear the empire resting. You stir from your sunny spot on the flagstones when a discreet cough, soft as parchment turning, signals it's time to go indoors. The same eunuch who guided you earlier tilts his head toward an arched doorway ahead. No clapping hands, no barking orders, not even a squeak of his sandals. You suspect he greased the soles with olive oil just to preserve the hush. Clearly, in Hadrian's world, silence is valuable, maybe more valuable than gold or grain. You rise, brush a few stray fig leaves from your tunic, and follow him across a threshold chilled by shade. The air inside is several degrees cooler, scented faintly of cedar beams and damp spearmint. This is the villa at Tivoli, Hadrian's personal playground, laboratory, and most importantly, nap laboratory. Built between 118 and 134 CE, the complex sprawls over 250 acres, bigger than some provincial capitals. Yet, despite its grand scale, each hallway feels like a lullaby. Vaulted ceilings swallow echoes, and even the marble mosaics underfoot seem to whisper rather than click. Your guide pauses beside a bronze plaque mounted discreetly at knee height. At first glance it's decorative, but the inscription reveals Hadrian's wry humor. Conclamat publice dormit, he who shouts sleeps outside.
Apolite treat, Roman style.
Think of it as the ancient world's do not disturb sign, though far heavier than the paper version dangling from hotel knobs today. You proceed down what archaeologists call a cryptoporticus, an enclosed corridor lit by slit windows. Mainstream history fact incoming. These underground passages allowed servants to bustle about unseen while their imperial master strolled above, blissfully unaware of logistical chaos. The walls are lined with porous pumice stone, an early sound absorption trick. Historians still argue whether Hadrian borrowed the technique from amphitheater acousticians or invented it purely to muffle midnight snack deliveries. Speaking of snacks, a niche to your left houses tiny terracotta jars labeled Mel soporiferum, sleepy honey. Legend claims the cooks infused thyme and poppy into honey so potent one spoonful could drop a senator faster than you can say senatus consultum. Fringe tidbit?
Maybe.
But you overhear a modern nutritionist in your head muttering, someone should bottle that for insomniac TikTokers. Joke number 1, free marketing tip from 2025.
Past the cryptoporticus, delicht blooms as you step into the centerpiece. The Maritime Theatre.
Imagine a circular moat surrounding a miniature villa on an island, accessible only by 2 retractable wooden bridges. No gladiators, no splashy naval battles, just a perfectly private retreat, Hadrian's personal nap pod writ colossal. Some scholars call it the first tiny house, others the emperor's man cave. You suspect it doubled as the world's fussiest snooze button. Lower the bridges, and not even a tax crisis could wake him. Your sandals find the wooden planks of one bridge. They flex softly. Hadrian mandated cypress wood here because it squeaks less than oak.
Another hush hack.
As you reach the islet, you glimpse cushioned benches arranged under a dome open to the sky. Sunlight filters in, painting lazy arcs across polished limestone. Water laps gently around the ring, its faint slosh offering natural white noise, ancient ASMR before microphones existed. Joke number 2, if Spotify had been around, Hadrian would have topped the sleepy Roman Emperor vibes playlist. A servant unfurls linen robes on one bench, today's nap wardrobe. You run a finger along the fabric, imported Egyptian flax, loosely woven so air can glide through. Hadrian believed breathability equals better dreams. Modern science might approve, at least you won't wake sticky. While you marvel at the setup, your guide points to a small alcove stocked with scrolls.
Hier lies Stern Bibliotheca Silentierstern. The Library of Silence.
Mainstream fact, Hadrian imported thousands of Greek and Latin texts, but arranged duplicates of his favorites in every rest chamber, so he never had to walk far for bedtime reading. Quirky policy, yes, but effective. No one wants to trek across 250 acres when half asleep. You stroll onward to a rectangular pond called the Canopus, modeled after an Egyptian canal. Statues of crocodiles line the banks, mouths agape. Remember the fig-shaded bench from earlier? The crocodile motif is your callback. Same emperor, same obsession with exotic calm. Yet locals whispered the reptiles were a subtle joke, since crocodile dung was once touted as sunscreen. Hadrian enjoyed reminding guests they sat by statues that celebrated smelly cosmetics. Joke number 3, courtesy of imperial bathroom humor. Close by, you notice marble slabs incised with shallow channels. Water once flowed through them, evaporating to cool the air, turning whole courtyards into natural air conditioners. Historians still argue whether this was Hadrian's engineering genius or a stolen Egyptian idea, but either way, stepping into the breeze feels like entering a mint-scented cloud.
You dug into the poezile, a grand colonnade encircling a shimmering pool.
The columns' capitals are thickly padded, yes padded, with felt. A fringe tidbit suggests Hadrian decreed pila soni supplementia, sound-killing pillows, after a startled pigeon once woke him. Picture architects stitching cushions around stone like giant earmuffs.
Overkill?
Absolutely.
Effective?
You could drop a bundle of papyrus here and it'd sound like a feather. As you continue, you can't help thinking of modern open-plan offices, everyone plugged into noise-canceling headphones, pretending they don't hear Karen rant about the copier. Yet 2 millennia ago, Hadrian solved it with architecture instead of gadgets. Maybe he was the original UX designer for naps. Finally, you reach the so-called Hall of the Philosophers, where busts of Socrates, Zeno, and Epicurus line a semicircular wall. Lamps are shaded with translucent alabaster to cast a glow soft as candlelit cream. Your guide explains that Hadrian liked to invite thinkers here, ask one grand question, then politely fall asleep while they argued. Nobody dared wake him, and many debates fizzled into whispers, proving that philosophy too could be sedated. As you recline on a chaise, you realize the emperor's villa isn't just a house, it's a giant lullaby scored in marble, water, and lavender. Every corner, every corridor, every cleverly placed cushion exists to kiss noise goodbye.
Some wäre bei onze Kolonnade, you have fehnt Hofbearts. Couriers from Rom bearing scrolls stammt urgent. They'll wait.
Even emergencies must tiptoe here. Your eyelids lower. The marble warms beneath your palms, the pool reflects shifting clouds, and a cicada thrums like a distant violin. You're halfway to sleep when that bronze plaque's threat drifts through your mind. He who shouts, sleeps outside. Noted. You exhale, let the hush take over, and wonder if perhaps the world would be quieter, gentler, if every office installed a cryptoporticus and some felt-padded pillars. Yet locals whispered the reptiles were a subtle wink at Hadrian's dry humor. According to one palace tale, recorded centuries later but still whispered during museum tours, Hadrian once instructed a senator to take your complaints to the crocodiles. They'll listen better than I. Whether this was an actual quote or just poetic slander, you can't help picturing it, especially as you step around a sun-warmed statue with particularly smug stone eyes. Joke number 3, ancient sarcasm is eternal. You wander slowly beside the canopus, watching the light play on the water, where lilies drift and the occasional frog performs its personal aria. This pond wasn't just a decorative whim. Historians still argue whether it served ceremonial functions, diplomatic theatrics, or Hadrian's private sleep therapy. That last one might sound far-fetched, until you notice the domed sleeping pavilions stationed precisely where the breeze curls around the water's edge. Every architectural detail here whispers rest. The ancients didn't have air conditioning, but they had geometry and wind. One of the pavilions, its interior shaded by gauze curtains, features a raised dais scattered with goose-down bolsters and lavender sachets. You lie back on the cushions, noticing a faint scent rising from the floor. A servant pours water over porous clay tiles, releasing stored aromas, thyme, rosemary, maybe even chamomile. Passive aromatherapy, Hadrian style. A little fringe fact for you. Pliny the Younger once claimed certain clays in this region remember fragrance, longer than human memory. Scientists today might scoff, but you, softened by herbs and sun, feel like believing it. A distant lyre begins to pluck a hypnotic pattern. You glance toward the colonnade where a solitary musician lounges, clearly under orders not to break the nap rhythm. The sound wavers just slightly, tuned not for performance but for drowsiness. Joke number 1 of this section. Hadrian didn't invent lo-fi beats to sleep/study to, but he'd be a fan. Beneath the surface calm, there's a tickle of irony, because despite all this carefully engineered peace, Hadrian's mind rarely rested. He ruled an empire stretching from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. His days began before dawn, with briefings about distant forts, trade convoys, grain ships, and rebellions barely quelled. So when he declared napping shall be imperial policy, it wasn't laziness, it was strategic. If Hadrian slept, others copied him. Even Praetorian guards took scheduled doses, believing that aligning one's rhythm with the emperor's protected their careers. Mainstream history note, Roman work-life balance wasn't great, but Hadrian arguably came the closest. Still reclined, you study the ceiling above, its mosaic of stars arranged not as constellations, but as nap moods. Each pattern, cloudburst, sunbeam, desert hush, was inspired by locations across the empire. This pavilion's was dubbed Numidian Quiet, named for the windless afternoons of North Africa. Historians still argue whether Hadrian designed these himself or left it to his court astrologers.
Regardless, you feel it walking. Your limbs soften, your breath deepens.
Joke number 2. If IKEA sold these ceiling tiles, sleep clinics would be out of business. The servant returns with a silver bowl of something cool. Not wine. Hadrian famously limited alcohol during daytime naps, fearing it fuzzed memory. Instead, this is pasca, a tart mixture of vinegar and herbs, diluted until it tastes oddly like electrolyte water.
You sip it.
Not delicious, but effective. Romans were onto something. Your eyelids lower just a bit. Suddenly, your guide lifts a corner of the gauze curtain and gestures toward a path that curls away behind the pavilion. Time to see where Hadrian really vanished when he needed rest beyond reach. You rise again, floating in that post-nap daze, and follow him past a hedge wall into what appears to be a cave. It is, in fact, an artificial grotto, styled after the sacred cave of Pan in Arcadia. The inside is surprisingly warm. Steam rises from vents beneath your feet. Another Hadrian innovation, a sleeping caldarium or hot room, designed to simulate the feel of a summer thunderstorm. Mineral-rich vapors coat the air, and the walls are alive with faint echoes of dripping water.
Adepa kind of kvit.
The kind that isn't empty, but full.
Heavy. Holy, even.
As you lie on a polished stone slab, another scroll rests nearby.
The title, Stern somnus et imperium stern, sleep and power. A joke? Atreatise?
Historians still argue whether it was ghostwritten by Hadrian's physician or the emperor himself. But the first line always stays with you. To command well, one must first learn to dream deliberately. Scroll's wax seal is unbroken, but a small label reads, on drowsing and decision-making. Typical Hadrian, organizing imperial philosophy like bedtime reading.
You don't open it, of course.
That's not your role tonight. Your role is to lie back, absorb the warmth radiating from the stone beneath you, and wonder, how did this ruler, this stern-faced army-booted emperor, build a reputation not just for conquest, but for slowness?
4 naps. 4 grottos.
The truth is Hadrian didn't just nap in Italy. No, you learn this slowly as your guide leads you through a side passage lined with marble panels etched with tiny travel maps.
Spain. Egypt. Britannia.
At each stop, Hadrian napped. No matter how cold the weather or tense the politics, he insisted on it. Mainstream historians confirm, he was the most well-traveled Roman emperor, logging tens of thousands of miles over 2 decades. And at each provincial outpost he installed, sometimes temporarily, his trademark sleeping cell, a canvas tent or garden shade where he could steal 23-minute rests between dispatches. In Alexandria, it was said he napped under a fig tree that was sacred to Isis. In Gaul, under a wooden lean-to surrounded by lavender fields.
And in Judea?
Scholars still debate this one. One source claims he carved a sleeping nook into a desert cliff. Another insists he commandeered a priest's rooftop garden and fell asleep to temple bells. Historians still argue whether this flexibility was about genuine rest or psychological warfare. Hadrian calming his body while unnerving his enemies. What's certain is that the empire followed. Governors began installing nap courtyards. Senators proposed siesta clauses in regional laws. There's even a fringe account of a Celtic chieftain gifting Hadrian a blanket woven with sheep symbols said to induce vivid dreams of pastureland. Joke number 1. Dream merchandising didn't start with Disney. Still reclined on your warm stone slab, you hear the faint sound of dripping water sync with your own heartbeat. It's a rhythm. Not quite music.
Not quite silence.
Hadrian apparently preferred this kind of ambient sound, what he called Earth's pulse. Fringe scholars speculate he believed these vibrations aligned his thinking with planetary forces. You're not so sure. But your eyelids grow heavier.
Your guide shifts, and you rise again. This time to emerge into open air, where the stars have begun to pierce the sky. But it's not night. It's midday.
You've entered a dome painted so carefully it tricks your senses. Stars shimmer faintly against a soft, false twilight. This was one of Hadrian's strangest inventions, the circadian rotunda. A building constructed to simulate any time of day for his sleep schedule, regardless of the actual hour. Joke number 2. Hadrian made time zones cry before clocks were invented. The rotunda is quiet except for the faint swish of sandals from 2 servants, silent, stoic, gliding past you with trays of herbal compresses. You're offered one.
Eucalyptus and rose.
It rests gently on your forehead, and the scent trickles into your brain like liquid peace. The rotunda walls are etched with lullabies. Not lyrics but patterns. Rhythm lines, inscribed in bronze.
A kind of visual metronome.
You stare at them and whether placebo or not, your breath starts sinking. In 2-3 out 2-3.
Arsch die Tide. Your limbs feel long, like marble columns.
You start to understand why Hadrian made this all official. This wasn't luxury. This was policy. Mainstream fact here: Hadrian issued decrees limiting court activity to certain hours, banned scroll reading after sunset, and encouraged court scribes to take mental rests. Historians still argue whether this made the empire more efficient or just sleepier. But there's no denying he ran a tighter ship than most. The man built walls across Britain, but also lavender beds in his libraries. Your guide points upward, where a dome panel slides open. Real sunlight spills in, just a sliver, onto a spot marked with Hadrian's personal sigil, a tiny owl sleeping on a scroll.
A personal joke?
Likely. The owl of Minerva, goddess of wisdom, always at rest. Joke number 3. Hadrian probably imagined her snoring through Senate debates.
The guide raises a hand, and you follow once more. This time through a tunnel of whispering Venus.
The foliage brushes your arms, and the temperature drops slightly. Crickets sing their timeless lullaby. Ahead lies the emperor's silent walkway, a stone path designed to deaden sound and slow the pace.
No quick steps allowed.
Walk too fast, and you're stopped. It said Hadrian once fined a courier for jogging through it. Fringe rumor, maybe, but delightfully on brand.
You walk slowly, the stone soft underfoot, and the air folds around you like a warm tucht.
This was the empire of sleep.
And somehow, it worked.
Chirp from somewhere behind the ivy, perfectly timed, as if someone trained them to lull you. The passage opens into yet another courtyard, but this one is different.
No columns. No statues.
Just an expansive, gently sloping garden shaped like a seashell, ringed with plants known for their sleep-inducing properties: chamomile, valerian, poppy. You've just arrived at what Hadrian's staff called the dream spiral. Here, under a sky that blurs light and shade into a constant soft twilight, you step onto a carefully raked path. The gravel crunches softly underfoot, just enough noise to make you notice the absence of all others. You are alone, as Hadrian often was when walking this path before a nap. A practice he considered as essential as council meetings or religious rites. In a letter he once dictated to his steward, partly preserved on wax tablet fragments, he wrote, "A slow walk before a slow sleep grants a quicker mind." Fringe scholars have latched onto this quote. Some believe the garden was designed not just for rest, but for lucid dreaming. The spiral shape mimics ancient Greek temple layouts, and several oddities suggest a ritualistic component. Small bronze bells hidden under thyme bushes, stones that vibrate faintly when stepped on, moss patterns that mirror star charts. Historians still debate whether these features were symbolic, functional, or simply Hadrian being eccentric. Either way, the man put serious thought into how he, and others, should sleep. Along the path, you pass miniature inscriptions on flat stones. "Exhale the empire," one says. "Let Jupiter govern himself for a while," says another. These were likely carved by scribes with an ear for dry humor. Hadrian himself was known for issuing sarcastic marginalia in official documents. A senator once submitted a lengthy tax reform proposal, and Hadrian returned it with a single sentence: "I find myself asleep." Joke number 1. History's first documented burnout response. You pause at a small alcove carved into the spiral's outer curve. A basin rests here, filled with warm water infused with herbs. The guide, still wordless, dips a cloth and offers it to you. You press it gently to your face. The scent hits immediately: lavender, orange blossom, and something faintly spicy. Probably spikenard, a favorite among Roman elite and sacred in several Eastern temples. The cooling cloth makes your face tingle slightly. Not unpleasant, like waking up from the best part of a nap but deciding to keep lying there anyway. In the center of the spiral, there's a low stone bench covered in thick, woven linen. You sit.
Then recline.
The bench is angled ever so slightly, elevating your legs above your head. Roman physicians believed this aided blood flow and calmed racing thoughts. Hadrian was obsessed with balance: bodily, mental, political. He had laws reversed, then reinstated, just to watch which version produced calmer provincial reports. Joke number 2. Micromanagement, but make it sleepy. Here's a mainstream fact you wouldn't expect. Hadrian kept a team of philosophers, physicians, and astrologers on what today we might call a nap council. Their only task was to monitor the emperor's rest quality and dream reports. There are even references to analysis scrolls, where sleep patterns were graphed and annotated. These scrolls haven't survived, but a Greek scholar in 3rd century Athens wrote, "The Emperor Hadrian charted his slumbers like naval routes." Whether that's hyperbole or fact remains a scholarly toss-up. You lie on the linen, arms resting gently beside you, and close your eyes. The sounds around you remain consistent: the wind brushing dry leaves, the occasional drip from a fountain. A servant somewhere adjusts a sundial designed not to tell time, but to mark when the next rest period should begin. You doze briefly. Or perhaps just forget time. When you stir, the garden's light has shifted. Still soft, but cooler now, perhaps sunset, perhaps not. The guide appears again, steps light, hands folded behind his back. He doesn't speak, but somehow communicates, it's time to rise. You follow him out of the spiral through a narrow stone corridor lined with faint murals.
They depict dreams.
Or maybe hallucinations. Hadrian riding a winged lion. A senate chamber floating on a cloud. A giant hand plucking figs from a tree that extends into the stars. Joke number 3. Hadrian might have invented the first sleep-themed fan fiction. The corridor opens into a circular chamber tiled with cool marble and warmed by hidden braziers. This is the transition room, used for that gentle waking phase Hadrian's physicians believed was essential.
No sharp noises. No sudden lights.
Just warmth, texture, and the whisper of soft sandal steps. Roman elite called this somnum levar, lifting sleep, as one might gently lift a cat from your lap. Here, you sip a lukewarm tisane brewed from blue lotus and fennel.
Slichtly bitter, slichtly sweet.
It tastes like calm confidence. A scroll lies open on a pedestal nearby. You approach, skimming the delicate script. It's not a law, not a diary. It's a list of birds that Hadrian claimed visited his dreams, each followed by a cryptic note.
Reven war on two fronts. Dove, harmony in the north. Crane, cities of our friend.
Nightjar, 3 quiet days. Historians still argue whether these were metaphors or just Hadrian being poetic. Either way, you get the sense the man treated sleep not as escape, but as diplomacy, therapy, and prophecy, all rolled into one. Ears tucked discreetly into the base of columns. The scent here is different, less floral, more resinous. Myrrh, perhaps, or a dab of frankincense still clinging to the warm stones. The chamber is low-ceilinged, almost cave-like, and everything about it invites quiet. You instinctively step softer, as if disturbing the air might offend the architecture itself. This, your guide gestures, is the Somnus Room, named after the Roman god of sleep. Not many visitors were allowed here. In fact, most Romans didn't even know it existed. It wasn't recorded in any official palace plans and shows up only in one offhand scribble by an architect who wrote, "The emperor's soul sleeps beneath the stone eye." Cryptic, yes, but likely referencing the carved eye motif on the domed ceiling overhead. The entire dome is studded with small glass insets, each catching and reflecting light like stars. By some unknown method, still debated by historians, these would glow faintly even at night. Some suspect embedded mica, others whisper about a primitive phosphorescence technique involving fish oil and powdered quartz. Historians still argue whether the glow was natural, alchemical, or simply a very clever trick of mirrors and torches. But no matter how it worked, the effect is still magical. You tilt your head back and stare upward, watching soft lights blink lazily across the ceiling like constellations slowly drifting off to sleep. Hadrian is said to have visited this room whenever he was troubled. Not for problem-solving, mind you, but for forgetting. To him, sleep was not an escape but a filter. "Let sleep sort the thoughts I would rather not," he once muttered after dismissing a delegation from Britannia mid-sentence. They'd traveled weeks to see him. He took a nap instead. Joke number 1. Hadrian's diplomacy was as horizontal as his posture. There's a low couch in the Somnus Room, made of polished cedar and cushioned with goose down. You sink onto it, the softness pressing up against you just enough to cradle, not overwhelm. Beside the couch, a small table holds an array of curious objects: a polished obsidian mirror, a folded papyrus with ink-smudged verses, a bowl of warm milk infused with crushed almonds. These were Hadrian's nightstand items, curated not for necessity but comfort. A mainstream historical fact: Romans believed dreams were direct communications from the divine. Emperors especially took them seriously. Some even had dream interpreters on staff. Hadrian's dream logs, though never found in full, were excerpted by later poets who claimed he often dreamed of floating cities, winged stags, and sleeping armies beneath oceans.
Poetic?
Absolutely.
Factual?
Scholars still debate whether these were actual dream accounts or elaborate political metaphors.
You pick up the obsidian mirror. It's heavy, cool in your hands, and when you tilt it, your own eyes look back at you, slightly blurred by the smoky reflection.
This was believed to help release the spirit into the dream plane. Or maybe Hadrian just liked the way he looked before bed.
Now, so meeting odd, just up off the couch, carved into the wall, is a simple motto. Tantum dormiens est ferus imperator.
Loosely translated, only while sleeping is the emperor truly sovereign. A bit bleak, but also rather elegant. Hadrian, known for both his sweeping architectural visions and crippling self-doubt, may have found his greatest peace not in triumph, but in the total surrender of dreams. Joke number 2. Imagine cancelling an empire-wide summit because your REM cycle looked promising.
Agent Lebel chimes somme wäre in the Walz.
Not loud, a single sustained note that fades like fog. That was the signal.
Time to turn in.
Hadrian's staff, as records suggest, were trained to schedule their movements around his sleep cycles. If the emperor entered the somnus room, the entire palace slowed down. Conversations dimmed, sandals softened with felt, even fountain pressure lowered. And here comes your fringe fact. In the northern wing of Hadrian's villa, archaeologists found a corridor lined with soft clay tiles and cork-infused walls. Literally a quiet path designed to muffle noise near his quarters.
Ancient ASMR, if you will.
You stretch, toes flexing against the couch, breath rising and falling with rhythmic ease.
Therese no rush here.
Even time, which usually marches along so rudely, seems to pause in this space.
You nicht nab.
Or just drift. Your guide, still present, though now more of a shadow than a person, sets a linen cloth gently over your legs. Weighted just enough to make you feel safely pressed to earth. Before you let your mind float entirely, consider this last image. Hadrian, wrapped in a woolen tunic, ink on his fingers from half-finished correspondence, reclining in this very room. He stares up at the dome, the stars reflecting faintly in his eyes. His empire, vast and fragile, carries on in silence beyond these walls. But inside this chamber, only sleep holds power. Standing nearby, leans against a marble column and speaks in a voice just above a whisper. He points toward a narrow doorway behind the somnus room, almost hidden by a cascade of woven reeds. The Garden of Pauses, he says, as if that explains everything.
You schuffle kvietli trug se Treshold, brushing past the reeds like curtains in a breze.
The air shifts again, cooler, touched with a scent of damp stone and something faintly metallic, like water in an old fountain. Your footsteps fall onto soft gravel, and before you even fully take it in, you know this is no ordinary garden. It's small, enclosed on all sides by trellised marble walls, and almost entirely silent.
No birds. No splashing fountains. Just the whisper of leaves rooping togeter.
The Garden of Pauses, it turns out, was Hadrian's personal sleep retreat, a botanical sanctuary grown not for beauty, but for sedation. Mainstream fact first, Roman gardens were often designed with symbolic plants, laurel for victory, myrtle for love, fig for fertility. But this garden was different. Here you find poppies, wild lettuce, and blue lotus, plants associated not with life, but with letting go.
Ancient sedatives. Sleep inducers.
A pharmacological nap in floral form. Joke number 1. If melatonin had a Roman cousin, this garden would have adopted it.
You pause before agnal tree with delicate violet flowers.
This, your guide says, is Syrian rue, once burned in Hadrian's incense burners. When inhaled in small doses, it doesn't knock you out, but it definitely nudges you toward a daydream.
And that's the point.
This wasn't a place for sleep exactly, but for slipping out of wakefulness gently. The benches are carved from soft limestone, intentionally unpolished to keep them cool and comfortable even in the midday sun. You sit, tracing the grooves in the armrest, grooves worn by centuries of hands. This was where Hadrian came when sleep wouldn't come to him. The garden didn't demand rest, it offered the possibility. Now a fringe historical tidbit. Archaeologists once found a wax tablet buried beneath a garden stone here, scratched with a poem in Hadrian's own hand. It reads roughly, "I have built temples from dreams. Let me now build sleep from stone." Scholars still argue whether it was a personal reflection or a political metaphor.
Probably both.
He did love a dual-purpose monument. Joke number 2. Hadrian was the kind of guy who'd build a garden to tell his insomnia to get lost. You get up, your body noticeably heavier.
Not in Arbeit weh, just, quieta. Like the gravel under your feet.
Hadrian insisted all pathways in the garden be covered in fine crushed shell and soft pumice, both for sound dampening and because, as he noted once, sharp stones offend the barefoot soul. No shoes allowed here, by the way. One senator famously forgot, and Hadrian made him sweep the garden barefoot for a week. It was called an exercise in awareness. Or just imperial pettiness, depending who you ask. In the far corner, partially concealed by a curtain of hanging ivy, lies a shallow stone basin filled with cool water and crushed mint leaves. Not for drinking, but for pressing your face into when thoughts refuse to quiet down. Roman sleep hygiene, evidently, involved aromatherapy and a mild splash in the face. Modern wellness influencers would have thrived in this villa.
You lean over, inhaling the minty vapor, as fluttering shoot.
Behind you, The plants rustle in that half-lucid way of garden things. Were those footsteps?
A breeze? A ghost of a gardener still tending poppies by moonlight?
Now another mainstream fact. Hadrian's final architectural project, the sprawling villa at Tibur, modern-day Tivoli, was said to be designed not as a statement of power, but of personality. Unlike the rigid grandeur of the Forum or the militaristic symmetry of army camps, the villa was filled with quiet courtyards, shadowed alcoves, and trickling water paths.
The vole place whispers, not shoots.
Which leads to another open question. Was Hadrian deeply introspective, or just a control freak with really good taste? Historians still argue whether the villa's meditative spaces were expressions of a philosophical mind, or the whims of a ruler obsessed with micromanaging his own comfort. Joke number 3. Hadrian didn't just want to live like a god, he wanted to nap like one too. You linger a moment longer beneath a canopy of flowering acacia, one of the few trees the Romans believed could carry dreams from one world to the next. Its petals drift lazily down around you, collecting in folds of your robe.
You don't brush them off. There's no need. Everything hier invites stillness.
Not silence exactly, but the kind of hush that lets the mind wander just far enough to lose itself, and find sleep waiting with open arms. Hadrian insisted be allowed to grow wild. Its long, feathery leaves move like breath in slow motion, and you can imagine the emperor reclining just here, watching light flicker through them like sleepy stars. There's no signage, no grand inscription, but if you squint, you'll see a faint mosaic underfoot. Worn, mostly eroded. Still, one word remains, quis, Latin for rest. Not the dramatic requiem aeternam of tombs, but the soft, everyday rest that comes before tea or a nap or a particularly uneventful Senate session. From here, the garden flows seamlessly into another of Hadrian's innovations, the nap corridor. Technically, the colonnade of private reflection, but most of his household called it Nap Street. A shaded walkway lined with reclining couches, each screened off with linen curtains and tucked behind fluted columns. Every couch had its own small writing desk, a clay jug of chilled water, and, most curiously, a bronze wind chime suspended from the ceiling. Not to make noise, but to indicate movement. If the breeze stirred it, you knew a draft was coming and could pull your woolen blanket a bit tighter. Mainstream fact, the Romans valued odium, a concept of noble leisure. But Hadrian took it further, institutionalizing rest into his imperial routine. Visitors and statesmen who came to the villa were often bewildered to find no audience scheduled until well past noon. The emperor is attending to his thoughts, they were told. Which was code for Hadrian is horizontal and unavailable. You try one of the couches yourself, sinking into the gently curved shape like it's remembering every past nap taken upon it. The ceiling above is painted in soft pastels, pale greens, sky blue, creamy peach, all colors associated with calming the senses.
No purple, no red, nothing imperial.
Just soothing hues and lazy brush strokes. Now a quirky tidbit. In one corner of the colonnade, there's a rotating hourglass carved from polished obsidian, reportedly designed by Hadrian's personal physician. It tracks a 20-minute nap perfectly, and flips itself when tilted just right. Legend says Hadrian could time his dreams to it. Whether that's true, or simply a product of Roman myth-making, historians still argue. But the object itself exists, housed today in a museum in Naples. It's affectionately called Hadrian's Snoozemaster. Joke number 1. Move over Apple Watch. Hadrian's sleep tech was on a whole other level. It wasn't just the emperor who used these rest corridors. His staff, favored poets, visiting philosophers, even bodyguards, were encouraged to nap, though not all accepted the invitation. Tacitus, for example, reportedly found the atmosphere disquieting. One cannot prepare military reports in a place that smells of lavender oil and sounds like rainfall, he complained. To which Hadrian allegedly replied, then go back to Rome and write your reports in the noise.
Diplomatic?
Not exactly.
Effective?
Absolutely. Joke number 2. When your boss builds you a nap wing and you still complain, maybe you deserve the Senate. Beyond the colonnade, the walls curve into an unexpected space. A domed rotunda with tiered seating and walls padded with soft cork and fabric. This was the Hypnos Theater.
Not for performance per se, but for the gentle act of storytelling before sleep.
On cooler nights, Hadrian would summon an elderly Greek tutor or a traveling bard to read aloud myths, philosophical musings, or sometimes, if you can believe it, his own early drafts of poetry. Whether anyone stayed awake is another matter. Mainstream fact, Hadrian wrote poems in both Latin and Greek, many of which still survive. They're moody, introspective, often about aging and memory. Not exactly bedtime stories, but then, neither is the Iliad, and that's been putting people to sleep for 2,800 years. Joke number 3. The emperor's bedtime routine included light verse and light snoring, usually not his own. Inside the hypnos theater, the air grows denser, scented faintly with rosemary smoke.
You feel your own limbs grow heavier, the world narrowing into footsie edges. This was the point.
Every structure in this complex played a role in engineering not just rest, but surrender. And yet, even here, Hadrian remained Hadrian. See that copper tile inset in the floor? When warmed by candlelight, it diffused a soft thermal current, creating a warm patch just under his chosen seat. The tile is marked with an etching of a small paw print, his dog's. Yes, even the imperial pup got a warm spot.
Pet pampering. A tradition oldatan most angpiers. As you rise, slowly, you realize so meeting.
This wasn't just indulgence. Hadrian believed rest was a political act. A well-rested ruler was less rash, more reflective. His policies during this period favored infrastructure over war, cultural exchange over conquest. The man who once marched legions now built aqueducts and libraries. Maybe naps had something to do with that. Historians still debate whether this shift in Hadrian's reign was strategic pacifism or exhaustion masquerading as enlightenment.
Perhaps both.
Perhaps neither. All we know for certain is that the emperor who embraced leisure left behind more gardens than battlegrounds. And as the soft chime of a wind bell echoes faintly through the corridor, you realize, that might not be such a boring legacy after all. You step away from the hypnos theater and find yourself wandering toward the more functional part of Hadrian's villa, the imperial kitchen and dining quarters. It's here you notice something oddly modern about the sleepy emperor's life. His obsession with food as a form of gentle ritual, especially meals designed to promote calm and aid digestion. Unlike the gladiator-style feasts one might imagine, Hadrian's table was more modest, almost minimalist, with a surprising emphasis on subtle flavors and soothing textures. Mainstream fact, Roman meals often consisted of 3 parts: the gustatio, appetizer, prima mensa, main course, and secunda mensa, dessert. But Hadrian's menus frequently highlighted lighter dishes, particularly during the afternoon and evening, to encourage restful sleep rather than indigestion-fueled nightmares. You imagine the cook preparing moritum, a type of herb cheese spread mixed with garlic and vinegar, meant to be eaten with soft bread. The aroma, you suspect, was comforting in the way garlic always is, familiar but gentle. Hadrian reportedly favored this dish as a late-night snack. It's strange to think of an emperor craving something so simple, yet here it is, a reminder that beneath the marble and power he was human, perhaps tired, perhaps craving ease. A quirky tidbit, Hadrian introduced the use of silphium, a now extinct herb from North Africa, in his kitchen. This plant was prized not only as a seasoning but also as a mild sedative, believed to calm nerves and ease the stomach. It was so valuable that it eventually vanished due to overharvesting. Imagine seasoning your evening meal with a spice that you know is disappearing forever.
Poetic, isnt?
Historians still debate whether silphium was truly effective as a sleep aid or if its calming reputation was more myth than medicine. But Hadrian's interest in integrating it into his culinary routine certainly indicates an early awareness of food's impact on wellness, a principle we only recently started embracing again. You follow the gentle clink of ceramics and find the dining area bathed in the warm glow of oil lamps. The tables are low, surrounded by cushioned stools, creating an intimate atmosphere designed to slow conversation and digestion alike. Servants move quietly, mindful not to disturb the relaxed mood. It's a far cry from the rowdy banquets one might picture when hearing Roman emperor. You sit, and the cook serves pulse, a porridge made from spelt grain, softened with honey and a touch of dried fruit. It's smooth and sweet, the kind of food that feels like a soft blanket for your insides. The combination of carbohydrates and natural sugars was, according to Hadrian's personal physician, a key to promoting restful sleep. The emperor even banned heavy wine consumption after dusk to avoid disrupted slumber. Joke number 1. No wonder he ruled wisely, no post-feast food comas here. Nearby, you notice a small shelf holding ancient scrolls of medicinal recipes, some recommending valerian root infusions or poppy seed concoctions to be consumed before bedtime. It's funny to think how close you've come to modern herbal teas just by wandering through Hadrian's kitchen. Maybe if you squint hard enough, you'll spot a proto-tea bag, though historians still argue whether the Romans really steep herbs as we do today or simply boiled them like soup.
Joke number 2. Herbal remedies in scrolls, Roman versions of Google it yourself.
As you prepare to leave, your gaze falls on a curious object sitting on a side table, a small ceramic jar filled with a thick, dark paste. This was defrutum, a concentrated grape syrup used in many dishes but also believed to soothe restless nerves. Some sources suggest Hadrian even applied it topically to his temples during moments of stress, combining aromatherapy with edible comforts. The lines between food, medicine, and ritual blur in this sleepy emperor's world. Finally, you note that food here was not only fuel but a form of gentle storytelling, each dish a chapter in Hadrian's pursuit of tranquility. The emperor's kitchen was a place where history simmered slowly, flavors mingled softly, and even the simplest meal could invite rest. As you step outside, the sun beginning to dip behind the distant hills, you feel the day's weight ease, the promise of a peaceful night drawing near. You stroll from the softly glowing kitchens into the vast and tranquil gardens surrounding Hadrian's villa, an area designed not just for show but for slow, reflective wandering. These gardens are a living testament to the emperor's taste for peaceful spaces, where every path, every stone, and every plant seems deliberately chosen to encourage serenity and, yes, occasional naps. Here, nature becomes part of his sleepy policy. Mainstream fact: Hadrian's villa famously incorporated elements from various parts of the empire, including Egyptian papyrus plants, Greek statues, and even a replica of the Canopus Canal. The gardens were a microcosm of the Roman world, but also a personal sanctuary for relaxation and contemplation. You meander past delicate fountains that trickle water in soothing patterns, their gentle murmur blending with the rustling leaves overhead. The layout encourages you to slow your pace, even pause on one of the shaded benches, where you can imagine the emperor himself reclining in a moment of rest, perhaps after a morning spent reviewing scrolls or dispatching messengers. A quirky detail you might enjoy: in one corner of the garden, there's a small patch devoted to silphium. Yes, that precious herb from the kitchen that might help lull you to sleep. Imagine an entire section of the garden devoted to growing what was essentially the empire's sleepy time secret weapon. The plant's disappearance centuries later adds a wistful note to your walk, like a lullaby that's been forgotten. Historians still argue whether Hadrian's use of plants like silphium and valerian in the garden was more practical or symbolic, but the garden's design clearly aimed at creating a restorative environment that mingled art, nature, and medicine. You pause beside a small statue of Hypnos, the god of sleep, whose gentle face and folded wings remind you of the delicate boundary between waking and dreaming that the emperor seems so keen to respect. The statue isn't just decorative, it's a subtle cue to visitors that this is a place where one might surrender to rest without guilt or hurry. As you wander, you notice carefully placed alcoves that catch the afternoon light just so, perfect spots to doze with a book or listen to the soft sounds of nature. There's even a small grotto, cool and shadowed, where water drips slowly and the air smells faintly of moss and stone. You can almost hear the quiet sighs of past visitors who found comfort in these secluded nooks. Joke number 1. If Hadrian's gardens were on Instagram, the hashtag would be #napgoals. Nearby, a small labyrinth made of low hedges offers a slow, winding path for gentle exercise or meditation, both reputed to help clear the mind and prepare it for sleep. You wonder if Hadrian himself paced this maze, seeking not just physical exercise but mental stillness, a concept surprisingly modern in its intent. Joke number 2. Labyrinth walks, the ancient version of just one more episode binge-watching. You notice a bird feeder designed to attract songbirds, their soft chirping adding a natural lullaby soundtrack. The emperor's planners clearly understood the power of ambient sounds, something that resonates with you now as you settle into this slow-paced story. A small plaque near the garden entrance reminds visitors that the design principles here reflect an early understanding of biophilia, the human need to connect with nature for well-being, a concept far ahead of its time. As twilight descends, you imagine Hadrian reclining in one of the garden's cozy spots, the cool evening breeze carrying the scent of herbs and damp earth. His policy of gentle governance extends to these personal spaces, places that invite rest, reflection, and a slow drift into the softer edges of the day. Joke number 3. No wonder his reign felt less like a boot camp and more like a spa day.
You take a deep breath, savoring the moment.
The gardens aren't just a backdrop, they are part of the emperor's strategy to weave calm and sleep gently into the fabric of imperial life. You stroll from the softly glowing kitchens into the vast and tranquil gardens surrounding Hadrian's villa, an area designed not just for show but for slow, reflective wandering. These gardens are a living testament to the emperor's taste for peaceful spaces, where every path, every stone, and every plant seems deliberately chosen to encourage serenity and, yes, occasional naps. Here, nature becomes part of his sleepy policy. Mainstream fact: Hadrian's villa famously incorporated elements from various parts of the empire, including Egyptian papyrus plants, Greek statues, and even a replica of the Canopus Canal. The gardens were a microcosm of the Roman world, but also a personal sanctuary for relaxation and contemplation. You meander past delicate fountains that trickle water in soothing patterns, their gentle murmur blending with the rustling leaves overhead. The layout encourages you to slow your pace, even pause on one of the shaded benches, where you can imagine the emperor himself reclining in a moment of rest, perhaps after a morning spent reviewing scrolls or dispatching messengers. A quirky detail you might enjoy: in one corner of the garden, there's a small patch devoted to silphium. Yes, that precious herb from the kitchen that might help lull you to sleep. Imagine an entire section of the garden devoted to growing what was essentially the empire's sleepy time secret weapon. The plant's disappearance centuries later adds a wistful note to your walk, like a lullaby that's been forgotten. Historians still argue whether Hadrian's use of plants like silphium and valerian in the garden was more practical or symbolic, but the garden's design clearly aimed at creating a restorative environment that mingled art, nature, and medicine. You pause beside a small statue of Hypnos, the god of sleep, whose gentle face and folded wings remind you of the delicate boundary between waking and dreaming that the emperor seems so keen to respect. The statue isn't just decorative, it's a subtle cue to visitors that this is a place where one might surrender to rest without guilt or hurry. As you wander, you notice carefully placed alcoves that catch the afternoon light just so, perfect spots to doze with a book or listen to the soft sounds of nature. There's even a small grotto, cool and shadowed, where water drips slowly and the air smells faintly of moss and stone. You can almost hear the quiet sighs of past visitors who found comfort in these secluded nooks. Joke number 1. If Hadrian's gardens were on Instagram, the hashtag would be #napgoals. Nearby, a small labyrinth made of low hedges offers a slow, winding path for gentle exercise or meditation, both reputed to help clear the mind and prepare it for sleep. You wonder if Hadrian himself paced this maze, seeking not just physical exercise but mental stillness, a concept surprisingly modern in its intent. Joke number 2. Labyrinth walks, the ancient version of just one more episode binge-watching. You notice a bird feeder designed to attract songbirds, their soft chirping adding a natural lullaby soundtrack. The emperor's planners clearly understood the power of ambient sounds, something that resonates with you now as you settle into this slow-paced story. A small plaque near the garden entrance reminds visitors that the design principles here reflect an early understanding of biophilia, the human need to connect with nature for well-being, a concept far ahead of its time. As twilight descends, you imagine Hadrian reclining in one of the garden's cozy spots, the cool evening breeze carrying the scent of herbs and damp earth. His policy of gentle governance extends to these personal spaces, places that invite rest, reflection, and a slow drift into the softer edges of the day. Joke number 3. No wonder his reign felt less like a boot camp and more like a spa day.
Utek adep brit, savoring the moment.
The gardens aren't just a backdrop, they are part of the emperor's strategy to weave calm and sleep gently into the fabric of imperial life. You follow the story now into the quieter corners of the empire, where Hadrian's sleep-friendly policies quietly shaped everyday lives beyond Rome's marble palaces. It wasn't just the emperor's inner circle enjoying these gentle rhythms. Provinces and cities adapted, blending local customs with imperial influences on rest and relaxation. Mainstream fact: in Roman Britain, for example, public bathhouses often included dedicated spaces for rest called cubicula, where visitors could lounge and catch brief naps between bathing sessions, a tradition likely encouraged by Hadrian's patronage. Imagine yourself walking through one of these bathhouses on a cool morning. The air is thick with steam, scented faintly with lavender or pine. Patrons recline on marble benches, eyes half closed, as the warmth seeps into their muscles.
The mood is calm, unhurried.
It's a communal pause in the day, a collective breath before returning to labor or errands. A quirky detail emerges. Some bathhouses reportedly played soft music or even used gentle water features to lull visitors toward restfulness. While no ancient Spotify playlists survive, historians speculate that subtle ambient sounds might have been a part of this restful design, echoing Hadrian's appreciation for sensory calm. Historians still debate how widespread such nap-friendly customs were outside major cities, but archaeological finds of reclining furniture and soothing mosaics suggest this restful approach had notable reach. You picture local officials in provincial towns receiving Hadrian's guidance and adapting it to their own traditions, perhaps blending Roman midday breaks with indigenous rhythms of rest and work, creating a patchwork of sleepy policies tailored to diverse cultures. Joke number 1. Imagine the confusion if a Briton tried to schedule a nap break during a Celtic festival. Talk about mixed signals. This theme of cross-cultural exchange continues in food culture, too. You recall the emperor's interest in ingredients that aided sleep, like the silphium herb or poppy seeds. These made their way into provincial diets, subtly influencing local cuisine with a dash of imperial relaxation. Joke number 2. Who knew that Roman emperors were the first to inspire comfort food with sleepy herbs? You also encounter accounts of provincial governors receiving letters reminding them to balance governance with care for their own health and rest. Hadrian's leadership style encouraged a culture of self-care even among those far from the capital. Joke number 3. Probably the first wellness memo from the emperor himself. Talk about thoughtful management. As you stroll through these provincial stories, you sense that Hadrian's sleepy policies weren't just about naps or herbs. They represented a broader philosophy, that rest, relaxation and gentle pacing were essential for healthy, sustainable leadership and society. It's a quiet legacy, one that ripples through time like the soft flow of water in those Roman baths. You let the image settle, the steam, the murmurs, the calm sense of shared rest, as you prepare to move deeper into the story of how Hadrian's vision touched the empire's farthest reaches. Your journey now turns to the quieter, often overlooked realm of Hadrian's personal routines, especially his reputed love for naps that stretched well beyond the midday break. He wasn't just a ruler who advocated for rest, he was an emperor who lived it, embedding sleep into his daily ritual with almost ceremonious care. Mainstream fact: it's documented that Hadrian frequently retreated to his private chambers in the afternoon, taking long naps to recharge before evening audiences, a habit not common among emperors known for relentless work. You can almost see him there, a figure in a softly lit room lined with tapestries, reclining on a couch draped with rich fabrics. The air is cool, perfumed lightly with incense. A servant quietly closes the door behind them, leaving Hadrian to slip into a restful state, detached from imperial worries for a while. A quirky tidbit: some sources hint that Hadrian's naps sometimes coincided with listening to soft music or even gentle poetry readings, suggesting a multisensory approach to relaxation. Whether this was a formal practice or a personal indulgence remains part of the ongoing mystery. Historians still argue whether these extended naps contributed significantly to his famed intellect and artistic sensibility, or if they were simply a luxury afforded by his position. You imagine the contrast: a ruler known for extensive travels and building projects, who nonetheless prioritized moments of rest, recognizing that the mind often works best after sleep's gentle reset. It's a lesson in pacing that feels surprisingly modern. Joke number 1. Clearly, even emperors knew the power of power naps before it was a corporate buzzword. In fact, Hadrian's correspondence includes playful remarks about his need for sleep, hinting at a self-awareness that blends humor with practicality. You might picture him telling an advisor, "The empire can wait. First, I must catch a few more minutes of peace." Joke number 2. If Hadrian had Instagram, his story highlights would be Nap Time Chronicles. This section also invites you to consider the emperor's broader sleep environment. Rooms designed for comfort, perhaps cooled by fountains, shaded by curtains, and softened by cushions, a far cry from the harsh stone cells often imagined in ancient palaces. Joke number 3. It's reassuring to know that while gladiators fought, Hadrian probably fought the urge to hit snooze on his plush couch. As the afternoon light fades, you feel the slow rhythm of the emperor's day, punctuated by these restorative pauses. It's a quiet rebellion against the chaos of ruling an empire, a personal ritual that offers a window into Hadrian's humanity beneath the toga and laurel wreath. And with that, you are gently nudged closer to your own evening rest, the story's soft cadence inviting your thoughts to drift alongside the emperor's slow, measured breaths. As you ease deeper into Hadrian's world, your attention turns to how his sleep habits subtly influenced the empire's culture of governance. His preference for calm, measured decision-making often followed periods of rest, embedding a sleepy logic into imperial policies that might seem surprisingly modern. Mainstream fact: it's recorded that Hadrian would sometimes postpone important meetings until after a rest, believing that a refreshed mind made better judgments, a practice rare among his often hurried predecessors. You picture the emperor in his private study, papers spread before him, but only after a deliberate pause for relaxation. His advisors may have grumbled about waiting, but Hadrian's decisions often reflected this thoughtful pacing. A quirky detail: some sources suggest he even had a special chamber within his palace where soft lighting and gentle breezes created an almost meditative environment designed to inspire calm reflection before tackling state affairs. Historians still debate how much this emphasis on rest shaped the policies enacted during his reign versus the more traditional militaristic approaches favored by earlier emperors. You imagine the scene: an official yawning discreetly, waiting for the emperor's nod to begin, while Hadrian sips herbal tea infused with sleepy poppy or valerian root, ingredients favored for their calming effects. Joke number 1. Clearly, he was the first leader to appreciate the strategic power of caffeine alternatives. This approach to governance extended to his famed legal reforms, many of which aimed to reduce unnecessary harshness or bureaucratic chaos, perhaps a reflection of his desire to create a less stressful environment for his subjects. Joke number 2. Less paperwork, more naps, Hadrian's unofficial motto, you suppose. You also glimpse the emperor's influence on his court's daily schedule, encouraging pauses and gentle breaks that allowed officials and servants alike to catch their breath, practices that some provinces adopted more enthusiastically than others. Joke number 3. Imagine a Roman Senate session where half the senators nod off. Probably not the most effective, but certainly in the spirit of Hadrian's slow-paced reign. The narrative gently unwinds, inviting you to consider how these sleepy policies quietly rippled through the empire's vast bureaucracy, offering a softer side to imperial authority rarely highlighted in history books. And as you settle further into the story's rhythm, you sense the timeless appeal of balancing duty with rest, a lesson whispered across millennia from Hadrian's chambers to your own quiet evening. Now, as your thoughts drift alongside Hadrian's fading footsteps through his vast villa, you come to the final stretches of this tale, the gentle winding down of both emperor and empire under the soothing embrace of evening rest. You imagine the sun dipping below the horizon, shadows lengthening, the soft glow of oil lamps flickering in spacious halls. Mainstream fact: Hadrian's later years were marked by a gradual withdrawal from public life, partly due to health concerns, making his affinity for rest all the more pronounced. You picture him reclining in his private quarters, perhaps gazing out at the gardens he so loved, the scent of blooming laurels mingling with the cool night air, a quiet contrast to the bustling courts and far-flung travels of his youth. A quirky detail: some historians suggest that Hadrian's affection for sleep may have contributed to his melancholic tendencies in later life, with naps offering brief reprieves from deeper personal reflections and worries. Historians still argue whether his slowed pace in old age was a personal necessity or a calculated political retreat, a question that adds a subtle mystery to his legacy. You sense the slow, rhythmic breath of the emperor as he drifts in and out of dreams. Dreams perhaps filled with visions of his beloved Antinous, whose tragic death haunted Hadrian's heart, or the enduring monuments scattered across the empire. Joke number 1. Even emperors know when to call it a day. After all, ruling the known world is exhausting. In these quiet moments, you feel the story soften, like a lullaby whispered across the marble corridors of history, inviting you to let go of your own day's worries and sink into rest. Joke number 2. If Hadrian had a bedtime routine app, it'd probably just remind him, nap more, worry less.
The finalscenes unfolds slowly, the Empires grand narratives yielding to personal peace, a reminder that beneath the grandeur and power, even the mightiest seek comfort in the simple act of sleep.
Joke number 3. You might say Hadrian was the original sleepy emperor, long before anyone else claimed the title. And now, as your own eyelids grow heavy, you find yourself wrapped in the same calm that cradled Hadrian's reign, the gentle closing of day, the promise of rest, and the soothing silence that follows. The story softly ebbs away now, like a quiet river flowing gently into night. Imagine the emperor's villa settling into stillness, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the faint scent of jasmine carried on a warm breeze. Each breath deepens, muscles relax, and thoughts slow their spinning dance. There's no rush here, no urgency, only the calm certainty that rest is well-earned and restorative.
Es jubriate wisses RHYTHAM. Feel the weight of the delighten, the mind grow still, and the world fade to a peaceful home.
Tonight, you share in a moment stretched across centuries, a gentle pause in time where history and sleep entwine, whispering a lullaby of quiet strength and serenity. Let this feeling cradle you as you drift off, secure in the knowledge that even emperors need their rest, and so do you. Sweet dreams, and until next time, may your nights be as calm and restful as Hadrian's many naps.